We are live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first panel of this first conference that we are organizing on population dynamics and economic prosperity. Already at the title of the Crete Center, we have set perhaps the means and ways of achieving the ultimate goal. Population dynamics is there, is a fact. So we need to look into that, and we need to realize the way it works and what we can do to make it work for us rather than against us. And economic prosperity is quite clear. The end product, that's the purpose of the whole exercise, if you like. We have decided to start this first session trying to figure out which are the drivers, the challenges, and the policy options in this discussion about demographic changes. And first, and perhaps the most important upon us, is the idea of aging, the fact of aging, the experience of aging that we all share. The chief economist of the OECD has just presented the numbers, the figures, the facts in each particular OECD country. But this is a common experience that in all our countries that we need to work on and figure out how we are going to address that. In fact, we all know that aging is not a passive situation. It's rather a very aggressive phenomenon these days that has impacts in terms of productivity growth, living standards, inclusiveness, and obviously fiscal sustainability. In this country in particular, but not only in this country, I've already been talking about another way of addressing questions of aging. Greece is going to be among the countries influenced quite significantly with a possible reduction of the population because of this demographic challenge. And we have also been talking about the ways to mitigate the effects of a shrinking working age population, especially through migratory flows. We are experiencing them already. As we all know, population movements are part of history, it's part of the human condition, and we need to figure out ways to work around them and at the end of the day, make them work for them. So I have an excellent team of people around me in order to discuss these questions. But first, I would like to call upon Professor Tito Bori of the Università Bocconi in Milano to just set the scene. Professor.
Thank you very much, and I feel honored to be part of this opening event of the OECD Center in Crete on population dynamics. And also I would like to thank the organizer for having invited me and giving me the opportunity to come back to this beautiful island, whose secret in longevity, I doubt it is only in the very good olive oil that you get here, but I think is in the quality of life over here. So I have about 8 minutes, and in these 8 minutes, if the organizer put on my slides, I would like to make 4 key points. The first one is that the key problem of our societies is not longevity. Longevity is only good news, and certainly it is something we should celebrate. The problem is related to fertility, to birth rates being falling, and being falling more than we expected. The second point I would like to make is that it's going to be very hard to reverse the fertility decline. And therefore, in the short term, we will need more migration. But more migration is not simply that you can simply say. There is clearly a very strong opposition to higher migration flows in OECD countries. So we need to find a different narrative about migration. Otherwise, it won't be possible to do so. And the last point is related to the fact that if you want to try and reverse the fertility decline, we really have to work more in terms of a balancing of family responsibilities, because that's a key reason why fertility is declining throughout OECD countries. The problem of sustainability of the demographic development is related to the declining share of population of working age. This is documented in this diagram. We are more or less going, all countries, toward a situation where we're going to have a 50%. Working age population will be no more than 50% of the total population. Until a few years ago, but the working age population was about 2/3 of the population. And in countries like Italy, soon we are going to be in a situation where we have only 1 worker per pensioner. Until a few years ago, we had 3 workers per pensioner. So that clearly is a problem in terms of sustainability, of welfare system, but also of GDP per capita, as it has been explained very well before. Now, the key reason why we are getting there is not longevity, is fertility. This diagram is showing this quite clearly, in my view. It is comparing the trends in the long-term level of working age population share in the total population in countries that are differing very much in terms of longevity. So we are comparing Zambia, where life expectancy is 40 years at birth, to France, where the life expectancy is 80 years, is twice as much as that. And as you can see, in the horizontal axis, we instead show fertility rates. The key difference is made by fertility rates. It's not related to longevity. So what is making our working age population to decline so much is because fertility is going down. So that's the problem. And fertility is declining more than we expected. Sometimes people tend to think that demographic projections are more accurate than economic projections, and I'm the first to acknowledge the fact that economists fail very much in projection. I personally trust only projections that concern the next 3 months, no more than that. But demographers are also missing the target most of the time. This is to show and document that in a number of countries, fertility is declining way more than we expected. The red line is the actual dynamics of fertility, and the blue lines are the different projection of UN. Now, it's going to be very hard to revert this fertility decline for the very fact that we are going to reduce the number of women in fertile age. So it's not simply something of changing attitudes towards having children. The problem is that there will be less potential mothers around. And so it's going to be very long, the process reverting these dynamics. Now, what are the problems related to this decline in fertility? It's not simply related to the decline in the share of working age. We say, well, we are going to increase productivity to compensate the fact that there will be less people working. But the problem is innovation are age-related to a large extent. When we think about big discoveries in science, we think about the Nobel Prize, and often the Nobel Prize winners are pretty aged persons. But we tend to forget that they are rewarded, they are given the Nobel Prize for discoveries they made in their young ages. This is a distribution of the age of the discoveries, of invention that gave right to get to a Nobel Prize. And as you can see, they are concentrated in the 30 to 40 age group. So young people are more innovative. They can do this radical innovation that are the engine of productivity growth. So having a youthless economy is going to mean that we are going to have a less innovative economy, and that will be clearly a serious problem. In the short run, migration can be a way out. Because clearly it is something immediate taking place. I don't think that the concern of the population right now concerns the job that the migrants can take, because we have never been in a situation like today where there are clear labor shortages around. Many firms saying that they can't find workers. So the possibility that migrants crowd out the domestic workforce is extremely low. The probability is extremely low. There are other types of concerns. There are fiscal concerns. There are concerns about criminality. There are also concerns about amenities, difficulties, and clearly there are strong power and political positions that are against migration. So the attitudes toward migrants are deteriorating everywhere. The left-hand side diagram here shows the opinion polls in the US. we are going to have the election in a few days, and the popularity of Trump is very much related to migration issues. So unless we find a different narrative about migration, it will be extremely difficult to accommodate more migrants and to deal with this crisis, with demographic crisis. I'm showing here an experiment, an informational experiment that we carried out in Italy and Spain, and I think it's quite interesting. Perhaps we should do something similar in Greece. What we did was not to talk to people about migration. We talk about other things. We did explain what was the dynamics of the demographic dynamics and the fact that we are going to have, about one worker per pensioner. And also we explain how the pension system operates, because people not understand often the work of a pay-as-you-go pension system. So in Italy, there is the widespread idea that it is like putting money in a bank account. And when you retire, you will just be able to withdraw the money from the bank account. They don't understand that the pension system works with current worker paying the pension to the current retirees. And therefore, if the number of workers shrinks and the number of pensioners increases, then there is a sustainability problem. So we explained this without mentioning migration. And then we asked the same person we had interviewed before about their attitudes towards migrants. And they improved dramatically. People understood that there is a need of migrants to pay for our pension system. So you don't need to talk about migration. You need to talk about these other things, and that changes perception. Not for everybody, I have to be honest in this, because for those who declare to have been voting for populist parties, then ideology prevails. But for the other people, this is a very powerful. So I don't think we need. So that's the narrative we have to introduce in the system. So to conclude, the shortage of young people gives them more bargaining power. That may be something which is something we, if I want to give some message of hope in this situation, is that we may have to deal more with youth concern, and that will a more important role in the policy agenda, hopefully, in the year to come. And there are also already signs that this is taking place. For instance, Portugal is now trying to attract young people back. We have heard before about repatriation policies in Greece. So I think that the issue of bringing back young people to our countries, doing policies that favor them, is something that will tend to have a higher position in the political agenda. And that's very important. And so we should really focus on this type of issues. We should invest in school, starting from nursery schools, because nursery schools are extremely important, are also extremely important for the integration of the migrants, are very important also to face another problem that concerns youth in our society, and this is the disease that is taking place, the mental disease, the spread of a mental disease among young people. Nursery schools are extremely important in promoting interpersonal linkages and fighting against the disease which is associated also to the development of social media. And also we need to have a new type of migration policy that, rather than trying to reduce the flows, tend to work more on the selection of a migrant, because the concern of the public opinion are not in terms of the number of people coming, are very much in terms of who is coming. They are concerned about that. So we should find ways, and there are positive experiences in this respect, selecting migrants and make sure that we do select rightly, because the policy closing down borders, putting walls, or having agreement with dictators on the other side of the Mediterranean are all policies that at the end of the day select the worst quality of the possible migrants, people who are more are illegal and are more prone to be captured by criminal organizations. And finally, it's very important to promote it's not simply a matter of incentivizing the fact of having more children. The key thing is to get a better balance of the burdens of having childcare in the couple. That's extremely important, because we see that the divergence between and the difference between desire and actual number of children, many women have only one child rather than two as they desire, is related to the fact that there is still a very unbalanced distribution of family responsibility within the couple. So doing things like, first of all, targeting transfer on fertility to mothers rather than fathers. Secondly, introducing where they are not in place or extending where they are already in place paternity leave rather than parental leave, because parental leave is taken always by women, by mothers, and not by fathers. So making sure that also fathers take responsibility with respect to the children is extremely important to increase fertility rates. And I think I stop here because my minutes have gone.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Well, I like the approach of concentrating rather on the dearth of youth rather than the increased numbers of aged persons. It has a certain view of the future as well. And you're entirely right in suggesting that we need new policies and new ways of addressing the situation, perhaps as an adjustment, as an adaptation, but also as a way of building resilience to this new society that we're looking at. So with these in mind, I now turn to our panel here, and I would address questions to each one of you, trying to figure out, to tease out, if you like, a few elements that might be of interest for our overall discussion. And I turn first to you, Konstantinos Gloumis-Hatsalakis, who is actually the Secretary General for Demography and Housing Policy at the Ministry of Social Cohesion and Family. We've just heard the Minister talking about the challenges this new ministry faces, and clearly you are the ones that have been asked to deal with implications of changing demographics. But what are these implications of changing demographics for social cohesion? What are the main challenges that you have identified, and how do you go about addressing them?
Okay. So thank you very much for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this really highly significant forum, and thanks the OECD and the Municipality of Chania and the Delphi Economic Forum for having us here. So the first question pertains to demographic trends and the challenges related to social cohesion. And certainly the demographic issue extends across national, economic and social domains. Often we focus on national aspect, the population decline and its implications for the national strength, or the economic aspect, how demographics affect economic development and productivity. However, the social dimension, and that is what we have to actually stress out in the ministry, as the minister as well said, is equally important. And we live in an era where societies, both in Europe and globally, are experiencing significant changes, and social cohesion is essential for citizens and the countries in order to navigate through this evolving and ever-changing social, political and economic landscape. So how we define social cohesion? Social cohesion is a complex condition that expresses the degree and the quality of the intensity of the relationships among the members of a society. It is rooted in the synergies among social actors, individuals, entities, organizations, and a high degree of social cohesion implies that society functions well, characterized by social solidarity and a shared sense of community. In reality, social cohesion is directly linked to the peaceful resolution of conflicting interests among different social groups in a society. The Minister was very descriptive in referring to the demographic changes in Greece. I'll just stick to 4 numbers that are really important to actually see how this is connected to social cohesion. The 2021 census recorded a population decline in Greece of 3.5% compared to 2011 and 5% compared to 2001. Since 2011, the natural balance has been negative in Greece, with deaths outnumbering births. Births in 1980 were about 150,000 in Greece and now are lower than 80. It's more than 45% decline in that. And currently, half of Greece's population is over 46 years old, compared to 39 in 2000. And the last one, and it's closely related to fertility rates that Professor also mentioned before, is that there is a reduction of 31% of women aged between 20 and 40 years old. That means minus 500,000 women of reproductive age. So the dramatic ones would say that this constitutes a bomb in the foundation of social cohesion. But even with a more rational perspective, an aging country with a declining population leads to a society where tensions and disagreements are frequent and consensus will wane. Historically, societies have been composed of youth, the dynamic segment of a society, which is more open to change, while older individuals typically possess the wisdom and the maturity in order to incorporate changes without jeopardizing the social fabric. Furthermore, younger population is the one that works and generates national wealth, a portion of which rightfully supports the pensions of the elderly. Population decline results in a decrease in national wealth, particularly when you have phenomena such as brain drain, like in Greece, that was really extensive, leading to increased social tensions as the income of various social groups decline. And we have witnessed that during the economic crisis in the last decade, phenomena evident across Europe and globally of intolerance and fanatism. That was already mentioned before. So what challenges must we therefore address? We must tackle demographic trends, but we should bear in mind, as the professor again said, that demographic trends cannot be reversed, especially the fertility rates. But their consequences can be decelerated. And that is what we need to focus on. And the understanding of an effective and a substantive response to the demographic challenge who led Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the Prime Minister, in establishing the new Ministry of Social Cohesion and Family, and within the ministry, the General Secretariat for Demographic and Housing Policy. And what we have been doing the last year, along with the help of experts and academics, is formulating the National Action Plan for Demography, which has a 10-year implementation time span. Its purpose is to develop strategies, to set the objectives, to formulate policies, and to implement appropriate measures to mitigate the adverse consequences of demographic changes on fiscal sustainability, on long-term competitiveness, on prosperity, and on social cohesion. The National Action Plan is organized on 3 levels: the axes, the objectives, and the actions. Each axis has specific goals pursued through targeted actions. So axis 1 is enhancing birth rates and supporting families. Again, no one should wait that a reverse in the fertility rates will happen, since, as already mentioned, the women at reproductive age have decreased by 31%. But still, there is a wide range of policies targeted on the financial support of families, of young couples, and also measures to reconcile work and family life. We have paternity, maternity, paternity care, parental leave, nursery schools, and giving access to young parents to have their kids there. Full-day schools also, that's been expanded in Greece. Childcare units, childcare allowances, and labor flexibilities as well. But demographic policies should not be just that. Demographic changes call for broader action on all domains as well. So we have Axis 2, which is strengthening employment, especially employment of different age and social groups. The youth, and we're working with the OECD on that, on the technical support by the European Commission, women, people over 55 years old, persons with disabilities. And another objective is to overturn the brain drain. We need to broaden the incentives, and we have already taken important measures in that direction in order to reverse the outflow of highly skilled young people that have left the country, especially after the economic crisis in 2009. And we have seen some important, actually, results in that already. Axis 3 is managing longevity and aging. And in that direction, we need to promote healthy and active aging in order to reduce health and care costs. Well, we saw before in Mr. Pereira's presentation the aging costs and how they affect GDPs around the globe. And long-term care is also very important. It's something that we are working in the last 2 years in the ministry as well, due to the excessive increase of older people and especially people over the age of 80 years old. Axis 4 is promoting local development and innovation, and we need to create age-friendly communities and enhance attractiveness of the periphery. This is why our next goal in the ministry is to also make 13 different action plans, each one for each region of the country, addressing the specific characteristics of these regions and the geographical needs of the regions in order to retain young people to smaller cities and to rural areas as well. And Axis 5 is informing, raising awareness, and conducting research. We need to set the narrative in general in demographics, and we need to promote new models as well. And one part of this measure is to actually have a demographic observatory in order to monitor and assess both the trends but also the relevant policies that are implemented by the state, so to have them in a consistent way everywhere. So to sum up, I want to emphasize that demographic policy is not the tablets of Moses written on stone. It's a dynamic text, the National Action Plan, and we will collect data. We want to assess the policies and the measures that will be implemented, diversify policies where needed, and bring up new ones in order to be more effective. And the OECD CREATE Center for Population Dynamic, I think, plays an important role in that, and this forum as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary General. I understand that you are working in a combination of incentives so that young people in particular can actually replace, if you like, those that we need, but also drawing upon the existing population and trying to figure out the ways that we can use each other better. The question, however, remains, and I have a sneaky feeling that somehow when we're talking about an aging population, we're talking about health issues, we're talking about care issues. We address this aging population as if they have no voice of their own, as if it's something that we need to take care of rather than include them in our own deliberations. Obviously, as we're all growing old, I'm trying to figure out the ways that we can become more inclusive in our policies, but in essence, keeping our voice in determining our future. Any ideas about that?
Yes, I think you mentioned right, inclusiveness is the word here. And what do we mean by inclusiveness is active and conscious process of integrating individuals into a society, respecting their different identities and particularities, and eliminating exclusion and discrimination. So there is a significant challenge in that, especially if a country's population is aging fast as we are experiencing right now. And there are various types of policies in order to promote inclusiveness, both in education, in the workplace, in cultural and social activities, and the integration as well of legal immigrants that we said aside as well. So while I will not actually delve into the to all these subjects, but talking about inclusiveness, I need to make a statement here that the National Action Plan is taking into consideration other action plans that we have also formulated in Greece and are equally important. And this is a way of also being inclusive. So it's a National Action Plan for prevention and combating homelessness, it's a national action plan against child poverty and exclusion, it's a national action plan on gender equality, a strategy for rights of persons with disabilities, and the action plan for mountainous and island regions. And these all also affect the aging population as well. So going back to the aging population, I would say that there is a big variety of measures in the axis 3 of the National Action Plan on managing longevity and aging. And you can see we really think it's important to actually create a platform for employment, volunteering, recreational activities for older people, and actually connect this to enterprises and entities, organizations that actually provide services like that. We have online upskilling programs at universities for people over the age of 60. We have a digital education programs, again, for people over 60. The extension of work life and gradual transition to full retirement is also very important. And I'm sure Minister Kerameos, that will be here on the next session, will refer to a very successful measure that we had for pensioners that wanted to be still active in the labor market. Enhancing social participation of older people as well, and intergenerational cooperation is important. And the formation of a consistent program on caretakers throughout the country for citizens over 65 years old with difficulties in living independent. That is something that was already mentioned and is really important. Home care, Help at Home is a program that is also run by municipalities, is really important in order to prevent institutionalization and the costs that these also have to societies. So we need to strengthen these home care programs as well.
Thank you for that, because you're actually bringing along age coupled with other conditions that end up in a kind of double or triple discrimination. A person with disabilities that is growing old is actually really much more problematic at the end of the day in its social handling than other things. But I must also say, and perhaps this is something that could be addressed much easier in everyday life, that there are a number of things that we don't even think about. Suddenly we realize that our banks would not actually extend credit through credit cards to persons above a certain age. And with the increased number of older people who find their cards suddenly not being able to be renewed, there's an immediate reaction. It was brought to my attention, actually, by groups called 50 plus. So these are the old age groups. And it has been partially addressed because when it was brought to the attention of the Association of Greek Banks. So these are simple things, really things that go under the radar, if you like, in everyday life, that might make a difference. And that is very, very important. And actually, talking about daily life, I just turn to you, Mrs. Sevi Volodaki, who is a member of the Greek Parliament, and in fact a local MP, isn't it? And she has to address what we have seen as visitors, but what people here in Chania and in Crete in particular have actually lived through, the challenges of a lower fertility future. That relates to the lack of hands for agricultural work, for instance, where you can start thinking about different ways of addressing that, but also the ways in which we need to change the infrastructure, if you like. Do we need as many schools as before? Because nowadays we don't have enough children. We might need more nursery schools, but are we needing overall more nursery schools since we're going to have much, much less?
Yeah.
How do you address that in everyday life, and how can you explain that to the people who would vote for you?
Thank you, Maria. So as a local MP, as you said, I would like to address everyone in Greek. So I'm starting...
But we have to make sure that they have, everybody has translation possibilities. So we need some help here.
Λοιπόν, αν ξεκινήσουμε με κάτι που όλοι συμφωνούμε σε αυτή την αίθουσα, είναι ότι σίγουρα η υπογεννητικότητα είναι ένα παγκόσμιο πρόβλημα. Ακόμα και η Κίνα, όπως σωστά υπόθηκε πριν με νούμερα και αριθμούς, που μέχρι πρόσφατα υπήρχε πολιτική περιορισμού σε γεννήσεις, αντιμετωπίζει και αυτή τώρα το ίδιο πρόβλημα. Η Ευρώπη επίσης είναι μια ήπειρος που γερνά. Και το ίδιο πρόβλημα έχουμε και στην πατρίδα μας, στην Ελλάδα. Και αν αναλογιστούμε απλώς και μόνο ότι ο αριθμός των θανάτων είναι μεγαλύτερος από αυτός των γεννήσεων, και μόνο αυτό είναι απογοητευτικό. Μας κάνει δηλαδή να ανησυχούμε. Κάνω λοιπόν αυτή την επισήμανση, γιατί πάνω και πέρα απ' όλα πρέπει να δούμε το πρόβλημα αυτό της υπογεννητικότητας και να μην το συνδυάσουμε με αυτό που υπόθηκε πριν, αποκλειστικά και μόνο με το πρόβλημα της υπογεννητικότητας. Γιατί τότε θα λάβουμε υπόψη μόνο ένα πολύ συγκεκριμένο χαρακτηριστικό και θα οδηγηθούμε στο να ερμηνεύσουμε το μεγάλο πρόβλημα λαμβάνοντας υπόψη μόνο έναν παράγοντα. Και αυτό θα αδικούσε γενικότερα τις έρευνες και τους αριθμούς, και θα έλεγα εγώ ειδικότερα και τις γυναίκες. Άρα λοιπόν η απάντηση στο ερώτημα αυτό που κάνατε δεν είναι εύκολη. Το μόνο που θα μπορούσα εγώ να πω σαν σκαρίφημα απάντηση, ύστερα από αυτά που ακούσαμε και από τον κύριο Γλούμη, είναι η στήριξη της οικογένειας. Δηλαδή τόσο σε οικονομικό, τόσο σε κοινωνικό, όσο και σε αξιακό επίπεδο. Άρα λοιπόν αυτό που είπατε πριν, που ρωτήσατε για τα σχολεία, για τους παιδικούς, για τους βρεφονιπιακούς σταθμούς, ναι, χρειάζονται ακόμη περισσότερα. Γιατί αν θέλουμε να υπάρχει μια ισορροπία μεταξύ οικογενειακής και επαγγελματικής ζωής, τότε σίγουρα πρέπει να εξασφαλίσουμε ότι υπάρχουν σχολεία και βρεφονιπιακοί σταθμοί, ότι λειτουργούν ολοήμερα. Άρα λοιπόν αυτό δίνει τη δυνατότητα στους γονείς, στον εργαζόμενο πατέρα και μητέρα, να δουλέψουν, να έχουν το ωράριο που μπορούν να πάρουν τα παιδιά τους, τα μικρά παιδιά από το σχολείο, να υπάρχουν βρεφονιπιακοί σταθμοί που να το υποστηρίζουν αυτό, και επίσης να υπάρχει αυτό που έχουμε με την παρούσα κυβέρνηση, τολμώ να πω, πολύ μεγάλη στήριξη, δηλαδή την παράλληλη στήριξη, τη στήριξη των παιδιών που χρειάζονται παράλληλη βοήθεια στο σχολείο, και από αυτό λειτουργεί ως βοήθεια και για τους γονείς. Δηλαδή υπάρχει έξτρα δασκάλα, δάσκαλος που βοηθά με μαθησιακές δυσκολίες, που μπορεί αυτό το πρόγραμμα να κρατήσει μέχρι το απόγευμα και να βοηθηθούν με αυτόν τον τρόπο και οι γονείς να δουλέψουν. Άρα λοιπόν πρώτα μια ισορροπία, όπως είπα, μεταξύ προσωπικής και επαγγελματικής ζωής, και δεύτερον όλα αυτά τα κίνητρα που πολύ σωστά αναφέρθηκαν πριν, δηλαδή να στηριχθούν οι νέες οικογένειες όσον αφορά στη στέγη, πολύ μεγάλο πρόβλημα, το στεγαστικό. Γίνονται λοιπόν για πρώτη φορά προσπάθειες και τρέχουν προγράμματα, άρα τα νέα ζευγάρια να ξεκινήσουν τη ζωή τους έχοντας λυμένο το θέμα αυτό ή μια βοήθεια όσον αφορά στο θέμα αυτό, και μετά όλα τα άλλα.
I have a sneaky feeling, and thank you for raising those issues. I have a sneaky feeling that when we're talking about this lower fertility future, we are in fact reshaping all our social policies. Mm-hmm. Because the moment you start talking about housing and schooling and the balance between personal development and family life and professional development, then you start reshaping, really, the way we conduct ourselves, essentially. Some of those things are not, might seem straightforward. Mm-hmm. And I'm always surprised when I see reaction coming from the things that I consider straightforward. For instance, there has been this program in this country a couple of years ago whereby all major corporations were supposed to create creches in the premises of the corporation so that children can actually follow up and mothers would remain within the professional cycle. The trade unions were dead against it. The corporations refused to use the money. And now we are coming back to the drawing board and we're trying to figure out means and ways in which the same amount of money is going to be used perhaps as an incentive for the corporations with a tax reduction or something like that, to actually convince them to come up with something that, to my mind, was absolutely essential and absolutely fundamental. And I must say once again that what I found even more shocking was actually the trade unions opposing that. But again, that brings us to the working population. In Crete, once more, there's been this discussion about migration flows. We have more and more people, more increased numbers coming into the country. There are no facilities for the time being in order to accommodate them in the short term. But really the question is the long-term process. Would this adaptation to a lower fertility society also include integration of migratory populations?
Κοιτάξτε να δείτε, η πραγματικότητα έχει δείξει ότι το μεταναστευτικό είναι ένα πολύ σύνθετο ζήτημα και γίνεται ολοένα και δυσκολότερο όσο έχουμε τα φαινόμενα πρώτον της κλιματικής αλλαγής και δεύτερον όλης αυτής της κατάστασης που συμβαίνει στη γειτονιά μας και η Κρήτη επηρεάζεται πολύ πιο άμεσα από αυτό, τόσο δηλαδή τον πόλεμο στην Μέση Ανατολή, την ταραχώδη κατάσταση στην Βόρειο Αφρική και λιγότερο όσον αφορά στο μεταναστευτικό, για την Κρήτη μιλάω πάντα, τον πόλεμο στην Ουκρανία. Αλλά όλο αυτό διαμορφώνει μια εντελώς καινούρια συνθήκη και μεγαλύτερες μεταναστευτικές ροές. Εγώ δεν θα ήθελα να συνδέσω την μετανάστευση με την τοπική εθνική κοινωνία και την πίεση που νιώθει αυτή από τις μεταναστευτικές ροές. Αυτό είναι ένα ζήτημα που πρέπει να αντιμετωπιστεί ξεχωριστά και τα τελευταία χρόνια η χώρα μας εφαρμόζει μια δίκαιη και αυστηρή, θα έλεγα εγώ, αλλά όπως πρέπει μεταναστευτική πολιτική και από την άλλη έχουμε το φαινόμενο που εντοπίστηκε στα χρόνια της κρίσης με το brain drain, δηλαδή όλους αυτούς τους νέους επιστήμονες που έφυγαν και αναζήτησαν μια καλύτερη τύχη, μια καλύτερη ζωή στο εξωτερικό και βλέπουμε τώρα, και αυτό δεν είναι μαρτυρίες, αλλά είναι νούμερα συγκεκριμένα, ότι καταφέρνουμε να γυρίζουν στην πατρίδα. Γιατί, όχι από νοσταλγία μόνο, θα πω εγώ, αλλά γιατί έχουμε πια τις προϋποθέσεις αυτό να γίνεται. Να μπορούν δηλαδή να γυρίζουν πίσω, να έχουν καλύτερες δουλειές, να έχουν καλύτερους μισθούς και να βρεθούμε σε αυτά που είχαμε τα πριν την κρίση. Άρα λοιπόν ένα θέμα χωριστό, η ανεξέλεγκτη μετανάστευση και πώς αυτό πρέπει να αντιμετωπιστεί και να μπει σε κανόνες σωστούς και όρια. Και ένα άλλο πολύ σημαντικό, αυτό του να υπάρχουν κίνητρα, να υπάρχει αυτό το μείγμα δηλαδή του να προσφέρονται από τη μία κίνητρα και ευκαιρίες και από την άλλη να δίνονται και όλες οι δυνατότητες ώστε να μπορούν να επιστρέφουν οι νέοι στην πατρίδα μας. Πώς θα γίνεται αυτό? Όταν από εμάς τους ίδιους, από αυτήν δηλαδή την κυβέρνηση, έχουμε κίνητρα που θα παρέχουν αξιοπρεπή διαβίωση για αυτούς που γυρίζουν πίσω και αξιοπρεπή εκπαίδευση. Και εδώ πρέπει να δοθεί μεγάλη σημασία σε αυτό που εύκολα λέμε και υπάρχει ως όρος περιφερειακή ανάπτυξη. Δεν ξέρω όμως πόσο το βλέπουμε έτσι, θα πω εγώ, σαν μια έννοια απλώς, ή πόσο το εφαρμόζουμε. Αυτό πρέπει να γίνει πράξη και να αντιμετωπίζεται σύμφωνα με τα δεδομένα που έχει κάθε περιφέρεια χωριστά. Δηλαδή, αυτό που λέμε περιφερειακή ανάπτυξη, ώστε να επιστρέφουν οι νέοι, να δουλεύουν στην περιφέρεια από όπου κατάγονται, να μην γίνεται αντιληπτό γενικά, γιατί άλλες ανάγκες έχει η δικιά μας περιφέρεια της Κρήτης, άλλη μπορεί να υπάρχει στην Αττική, άλλη μπορεί να υπάρχει στη Μακεδονία. Υπάρχουν συγκεκριμένες δουλειές εδώ, συγκεκριμένες οι δυνατότητες να απορροφηθούν άνθρωποι σε συγκεκριμένα επαγγέλματα και άρα εκεί πρέπει να δοθούν τα παραπάνω κίνητρα και αυτό να γίνει παράγοντας έλξης για όλους τους νέους μας που έχουν μεταναστεύσει στο εξωτερικό.
For those of you who are not familiar with Crete, let me tell you that Crete houses some of the best universities and innovation centers in this country. And that's actually an area that draws upon these kind of new minds, if you like, the young minds who would like to come back. But I think that I would need to differentiate between regional development by providing incentives for people to stay in the country or return to the country, in essence recycling the population of the country. It has been a problem due to the financial crisis, but at the end of the day, we are talking about the same group of people. And it's another thing, if you like, is the external element of regional development, drawing people in through lawful migration by selecting the kind of people that you would like to invite, rather than addressing boatloads of people who arrive without any situation, without any screening or any filtering whatsoever. Let me tell you, and that will be perhaps my last point in that, my last comment in that respect, we haven't seen as yet that many climate migrants in the vicinity. As of this moment, climate-induced migration tends to remain close to the original basis. So we haven't seen people who have actually crossed the Mediterranean for that. On the other hand, we have wars all over the place, and we have also something that we have not seen too much on our TV screens, the war in Sudan and the pressure on the Sahel. I have been talking recently to Filippo Granti, the High Commissioner for Refugees in the UN. We were actually talking about Kavdos and the boatloads arriving in the south of Crete. And he was just looking at me sort of saying, 120 people in Kavdos is not a problem. 6 million people in Sudan is a problem. So let's concentrate on the 6 million people in Sudan. And I have to tell you that, you know, the number is sort of, frightening. So we have to make sure that somehow peace is restored and these movements are somehow channeled in a proper way. For the time being, however, and I'm turning to you, Professor Subbu Subramanian, Professor of Population Health and Geography at Harvard University. Your area of expertise is, I understand, mostly health. And when we are talking about aging populations, clearly the health challenge ends up being up there, and we have already seen the costs associated to this type of health challenges. So what's going on around here? How much is this thing going to cost us? And how are we going to be able to afford it?
So let me start from just by first of all thanking the OECD for inviting me here, and to the Chania island here, the Crete island, and it's been wonderful here. So I'm most grateful to be here. So let me start by on this idea of, and I think we have already heard in the morning several facts. And I think the two big ones are both consequences of exactly what we should have anticipated. One is the increase in life expectancy. We worked towards it. We got it. and aging will be one part of it. And the more difficult one might well be the fertility, but that too, we worked for it. We compressed, we said, it was a good thing to have girls go to school, delay marriage, and so most of the compression or the decline in fertility has happened in the age group 15 to 24. So which is again a good thing. But in doing so, we have compressed, because even though biologically you can have children up till 49, I'm sure no women are going to try and have after 35. Not only the risk goes up, so we have shortened that window. Plus, our research has shown that if you're going to have multiple kids, we should space them, unlike our great-grandmothers who would probably have children every year. So we know that at least 2 to 3 year spacing, that means for 2 kids, you need 6 years. And you've already changed. So these are sort of good things, and I don't know why these were not anticipated. I was not around at that time. But certainly I feel like, as Professor Alvaro said, this is something that we should be proud of. We worked towards it, we got it, to what we wanted. I think the one part that I want to sort of take this opportunity to also honor one of the pioneers in healthy aging is Professor James Freeze. I don't know how many of you have heard. So in 1980, he published a classic commentary in the New England Journal of Medicine called The Compression of Morbidity. Okay, this was in 1980, 50 years ago nearly, or 45 years ago. And he really laid out 2 conditions. He was clearly a visionary, and in most cases, we would regard him as a aging pioneer, or healthy aging pioneer. This was all happening. And he said, in order for us to age in a healthy way, 2 things he kind of put forward. One is that the age of onset of our morbidity and disability related to that, potentially, should be delayed as much as we can. Okay? So what you really want is you live a long life, you get sick really towards the end, and then you die. So he wanted to compress the time when one is, quote-unquote, not healthy or not sick. So part of the thing would be to delay the onset of disease and disability. And the second, of course, he assumed, and I think, which is that he said that there is a limit to our lifespan. We are not going to keep going to 120, 130. I know Jim Worpel was a big advocate of that, but evidence does not seem to suggest that we are extending our lifespan. We are pushing more people to living up till 85 or even 90 or 100, but not really extending of the lifespan. So if you take these 2 as a framework for understanding healthy aging, on the second one, I think we have more or less the evidence is clear that there is a limit to our lifespan. More people will live longer, but span has not increased. So that's kind of good news in some ways. We are not looking at an open-ended thing. But the evidence on the age of onset, I think people have not, in my mind, being sort of following that research area. All these Dallies and Halleys, they're all part of that metric, so it's supposed to be. But I don't think they directly answer the question, have we delayed the onset of morbidity, or on the contrary, are morbidity happening earlier? If it is happening earlier, and we are living longer, then you're going to spend a lot more time sick. And that's something that he was arguing that we should try to avoid in 1980, remember. So we are still grappling with that question. So I think there is a need for a much clearer understanding across different societies in a cross-comparative way. How much has this age of onset of morbidity where has it shifted? And if there are examples where successfully some societies have delayed the age of onset. Now, mostly when we talk about like disability-adjusted life years or healthy life years, we are only focused on functional ability. There is a way we measure it. Can you walk like 10 steps, etc. But I think we need to expand the notion of morbidity to like mental health. Especially the more we will push people to 80s and 90s, dementia is now more likely to be a normal thing because you have crossed the hump of the cardiovascular disease. You're not going to get cancer at 90 if you haven't got it all the way already. But cognitive decline is going to be a huge issue. And I think like cognitive decline, I think we are also concerned even starting earlier. And that may relate to, because we have this notion of retirement at 65. And we know there is a sharp drop in cognitive decline or mental functioning at that point. So the first thing I would say is like I think we need a very clear way to sort of document the evidence. But related point for a larger implication would be this means that we have to target the group, which I'm very pleased to hear in all of today morning and including now, that we have to focus not on the aged, but on the ones who will age. So maybe folks in the 25 to 54 age group now. So there are two aspects to policy, right? One, what can we do about the 65, 75, 85 folks? And there's only so much you can do. And there is some cost implications of that. But can the future cohort, can that at least more consciously healthy aging, can we put that? And that group would have to be the 25 to 54, or 64. Mind you, like even in Greece, I know that there is a sort of, we have talked about an increasing proportion of 65 plus, but we would still have 50% of our population that will be under 65. That's a pretty half of our population, and there's a fair bit. So I'm very pleased to hear about the focus on, because if we can, learning may have to change. We may have to think differently about our curriculum. Maybe how can healthy choices be made? And because behaviors are not formed at 65. It's hard enough to change behavior when you're young. So good luck with changing later. But I think like focusing at that early age might be, and it is in that regard that I saw like Jim Fries was really a pioneer, because he had two ways to sort of handle these perspectives. One, the aged itself, but I've not seen in the aging literature, so I hope that through the center, hence yesterday as I was remarking, the aspect that in the center's title you have population dynamics, I think that's the key in my mind, because this will keep fluctuating. And the same thing one may have to deal with what was raised before as a fertility, which is a much harder issue. I think in that context, I would just say, we have shied away in demography to come up with any normative idea. And I'll just kind of, in 2000, when I joined Harvard, at my center, there was an event that the world had reached 6 billion people. Today, we are 8 billion. I do not recall in the room anybody breaking sweat. What are we going to do that in 20 years we're going to add 2 billion more? So I think we will adapt. I mean, we have adapted very well, come to think about it. And even in 2100 as a world, we would still be 11 billion people, right? So, but I don't know, we have this image of a pyramid, and it's all very empirical, and maybe now it will more look like a chocolate bar, right? But I think it might be useful to think about, especially vis-a-vis the other challenges, the 5 structural challenges that were posed. Is there a discussion on the table, even let's say we come to replacement level, 2.1, right? But replacing how many? So will Greek be fine? Is it replacing 50 million constantly, or replacing 25 million constantly, right? So I think it's been a moving train because populations have been increasing and we keep saying fertility is going down. And so I think like we need some, at least room for some normative discussion, conceptual discussion, because this will have direct implication on per capita GDP. This will have direct implication for sustainability initiative. So I feel like this might be, and then at least from a conceptually, if we can figure this out, that might help us then plan what kind of approaches we can adopt towards a healthy aging society.
I'm not sure whether we can actually plan for just about everything. I mean, this decline in fertility is not the first time in history that we have seen that. Of course, last time it happened, empires fell.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not so sure whether we... But what you are talking about right now sounds to my legal ears very much like prevention and mitigation.
Right. Yeah.
And these are tools that we are very well aware of. We are familiar with them. We know how to work with them. They need a bit of money, but basically they need adjustment. And perhaps our health policies, and especially all the money that are required for health care at the end of the day would have to be adjusted as well. And keep in mind also that doctors, nurses, healthcare givers are actually going to be in dearth because their numbers are reducing as well. So are we talking about leaps in innovation? Are we talking about robot nurses? Are we talking about, I don't know, miracle pills or things like that? Is that in our future?
So I think that's thank you for raising that point, because I think, you know, we haven't, so a good chunk of our life expectancy gains initially comes from saving the child in the first year, right? Those are mostly public health interventions, okay? Other than right now, we are kind of plateauing out at saving a neonatal death. I mean, that's really hard, and it can get very expensive, depending on how preterm the kid is. But we have pretty much hit the low. But for the extending life after 65, unfortunately, has not happened from a preventive perspective, right? This is what Fries was trying to... In fact, in every society, the risk factor profile has only gotten worse, but medicine has really delivered in keeping our cholesterol under check, our hypertension under check, our diabetes, etc. Plus, in fact, if I give you a Medicare statistic that I know of, so 30% of all Medicare is spent in extending the last 2 years of a person's life. I don't know, so that tells you this part about care. So certainly I think there is a sort of a two-component. Prevention at 65 is probably too little too late. You can't do very much, so we will have to. But your question about then care, long-term care part, I think here, what was mentioned before, I think it was Professor Alvera, who was talking about lifelong learning, and I think we could look at, I think, two case studies. I would be very curious to see the OECD report that you have done on Japan. I believe that there are a couple of instruments that they have used on long-term healthcare, quote-unquote insurance. Robotics may be in play, but that is not unique to aging. Aged only. It will apply to everyone because nurses are injury-prone because of the type of work they do. So there is clearly an aspect there. But in Singapore, they have also sort of emphasized this lifelong learning. And whether there is an opportunity there in that age group to kind of still be able to get them to be productive, et cetera, I think that we'll have to see. But I think we'll have to just see what communities have successfully managed this kind of a thing, you know. So I think, to my mind, I think Japan is the only one which is already there. in terms of, and whether to some extent can we really learn anything from the centenarians? I don't know. I mean, that would be, again, waiting to see. But certainly, I think if we can push more preventive now in the 25 to 64 age group, that will reduce the cost as well when the time comes when they become old. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's perhaps the right time to plug in all these lifelong education programs that the University of Athens is preparing. So that's perhaps the kind of thing that we're looking at. But you have been talking about public policies, and I now turn to Michalis Vlastarakis, the Group Chief Marketing Officer from Eurobank, and talk about the private sector. Because, okay, the state and all our states together in the OECD can actually plan for the future, but at the end of the day, you have to do it. And you have to pay for it as well. So how would this population aging affect business dynamics? What are your responses to the challenges that are cropping up left, right, and center?
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Gavunelli. First of all, I would like to congratulate all the organizers, OECD, the mayor of Chania, and of course, Mr. Tsomokos, who is always on the forefront of all these initiatives in our country. So the question is, does the private sector have any role in this discussion? We believe it has. And 3 years ago, when on the occasion of the 200 years of the anniversary of the Greek Revolution, we thought about all the challenges who are coming to the country. And I think now it's obvious. Nowadays, it wasn't. At that time, it wasn't. Nowadays, it's obvious that the biggest challenge for our country is the demographic, and not only for our country, for the Western countries as well. And then the question is, okay, what can we do? And of course, we decided that the state and the country and the government and everything, all the authorities have the primary role, but we believe it is our responsibility to do a series of things as well. And what we decided to do. First of all, at that time, there was no real interest in the public discussion. Not that much, certainly not that much as it is today, and we are partly proud of that. So first of all, we wanted to raise interest by financing a study, a thorough study, and we were happy to cooperate to this direction with EOV. Professor Vetas is today with us, and he will be speaking later today. And he took the leading role in his team to create a study 3 years ago where it did not only examine all the challenges, but created and ended up with specific policies. And of course, these were offered to the government, to the officials, based on the experience of other countries as well. More recently, together with the Ministry of Social Cohesion and Family, we were happy to support their initiative to have a research in Greece what the real issue in our country is. And there we had some very interesting outcomes as well, because everybody keeps saying in Greece that the economic challenges, and how can some young people bring a child into this world, and so on and so forth. Of course, economic challenges are there, but the social part, I might dare to say, it might be nowadays even more important. So new values, new priorities, career, financial independence, unfortunately, do not prioritize the creation of a family as it was 30, 40 years back. So as soon as we realized all this, then we had to do some tangible things, of course, to the society, okay? So we initiated a number of cooperations with NGOs who are experts in these specific pillars, and more or less are all the pillars we have heard about today, and I'll explain in a second. And the third part is, and I think this is a big responsibility for all big organizations, we in Eurobank, we are a great family ourselves. We are more than 6,000 people. So if you focus on how you can assist on your people, on your family, it can create, believe me, a change itself. You see families who had one child, and if you try to help them a little bit more, they decide on the second child. Or if they have two, they decide on the third. And actually, the economic parts are much more important for those who have one child to decide to do the second or the third than those who do not have children to decide to have the first one. This is another very interesting outcome of the research we have done together with the ministry. So what we decided to do on the social front, first of all, awareness about fertility. Young people, even ourselves, I think the majority in this country would not know the biological limits, fertility limits, the percentages, which unfortunately are very, very gloomy percentages about fertility rates, about problems, and all this. So we raised awareness, and of course we provide free IVF, because this is a very, it bears a substantial cost, yeah, the IVF. First of all, to start to help people who desperately want to create a family, and they don't have, let's say, the funds to do it, okay? And of course, all these things, the social things I'm gonna say, we could not provide everything to the whole country. We decided to focus on a very, with strong symbolism area of Greece, all the eastern borders from Evros all the way down, all the small islands to Dodekanis and to Castellorizo. And why there? First of all, these are really remote places, okay? Places with not enough medical support, and so on and so forth, schools, nursery schools, and all that. So we provide free IVF there to all the young people who want, let's say, have these issues. We provide baby packages in cooperation with the Archbishop of Athens and Apostoli for all children born up to the first year, let's say, all the necessary things, because the young parents have a financial burden to support with all the new things which come into the house. Educators in small islands in cooperation with the municipalities there. Seminars on family issues and family issue awareness with another very prominent NGO which is called Together for Children and is famous in our country. And of course, we initiated also a helpline for these remote places where parents can call 24 hours a day for all the issues they might face with their children. Moving on to another big challenge, in remote places, people unfortunately do not have permanent and certain jobs. So they cannot make such a long-term decision to create a family if they don't know what comes the next day. So with the help of technology and the assistance of technology, we created jobs in these remote places to make these people stay there and create their families there. So lots of people from Evros and from North Aegean, and we keep going this program, have also already joined the customer service of Eurobank, and through remote assistance, they help our clients all over the country, of course, but they are staying in the small villages, in Evros, or in the remote islands. And of course, through our another thing, we run an incubator and an accelerator for startups at Eurobank, and we decided to provide extra seminars and workshops for female entrepreneurship and all that thing in these places. And on our part, on our responsibility, because we're a bank, we initiated insurance products for free for the first 2 years of the children, and so on and so forth. And because it was mentioned, the mortgage, we offer to all the families who have 3 children and more, we offer a mortgage which is almost free. It's 1% all-in cost for up to 40 years for fixed rate no changes for a family to be able to create, let's say, a future and find a house and so on and so forth. So I'm finalizing, and I don't want to take more time. And as we are a bank and we measure the results and we want to have measurable results, I close with all the numbers. So 75 new jobs in our customer service, 800 baby packages for young parents, 4 educators in small islands, Aistratis, Castellorizo, Inouses, Psara, 35 seminars for family issues, and teenager topics as well, like bullying and all that, which unfortunately is so current lately. And more than 5,000 parents have used the hotline, 17 events about fertility, and most importantly, 43 newborns out of IVF, in vitro fertilization. And I close my, let's say, my small talk with this, that somebody could argue, okay, all these things have changed history for this country, have changed, let's say, all the projections we have seen. Of course not. But we believe 2 things. Over the term, we can change the culture a little bit. We can understand the issue much more. We can understand biological limits much more. And for these 40 families as well, we changed the whole world because this was their dream and it came true. So thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Well, every baby counts. There's no question about that. So thank you for the practical matters. And as time draws to the end, let me try and put together the elements that I see emerging and that are worth further discussion. Clearly, we need to think about the future and the trends and the way we're moving into a low fertility society phase. But we certainly need also to concentrate on the mitigation attempt for the present and the adjustments that we need to make in this kind of situation. These adjustments would not be simply the product of a public policy drive. They need to be going hand in hand with society, social elements, social security, and obviously the private sector. We can talk about regional development, but unless there is somebody who would be offering a job there, or creating a job, or keeping the old job going, that is important. The mayor of Halki, another very small island, was telling me that there's been a drive, that there are 4 youngsters who have just gone through university to become teachers. And their problem is that their first position could be anywhere in the country. And they simply want to go back home. Yeah. And the mayor said, bring them over, because I can provide with all kinds of incentives. They do have a house there, and they would stay on in the island, and they're young people, so staying on in the island, they would actually come up with young families and more babies. So there you are. This is our intellectual contribution to the discussion, and this is the end of this first panel. Thank you all very, very much for that discussion, which I hope that our audience and those who are following up online have found also interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.